Now, our next guest is a critically acclaimed journalist and author who's become the internet's go-to for reading recommendations.
But she swapped fiction for fact as she explores how reading can benefit our mental health. Please welcome Daisy Buchanan to the show. Good morning, Daisy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
People must be like, you had to get into books with a name like Daisy Buchanan. Like The Great Gatsby really set you up for that, didn't it?
It was thought. I mean, hopefully I'm nothing like that Daisy, who's
yeah,
a little bit of a woman.
Yeah.
So you're the antithesis of that, Daisy. You're like, we can do good things for daisies. Tell us about your new book, Read Yourself Happy.
So Read Yourself Happy it's how to use books to ease your anxiety. I'm a very anxious person. I grew up really struggling with anxiety. And I think now lots of people are really struggling with. There's lots to be anxious about, let's face it. And I found that whenever I was feeling a bit low and a bit edgy, I reached for a book. And I did that instinctively, I think, when I was little. And then definitely during the lockdown, I realised I was reading lots of news on my phone in the morning, getting very anxious, not actually learning very much. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to try and start with a book and see if I feel a little bit differently. And yeah, I just realised that I felt so much better when I read that. It felt really, really calm. And I don't think it matters what you read. I think you can read books about gardening or cookery. You know, you can read like a manual about fixing cars. It's the act of engaging with the words and being in that place and being calm. I think it just does wonders for all of us.
Oh, completely. But you've also looked into the psychology and the science behind reading and our mental health. And what did you find whenever you went delving into that side of it?
Oh, what's so interesting is the way our brains work. Now, forgive me, because I might get the science wrong. Do you write in? Do you find me on social media and tell me off for getting my science wrong? The part of our brain that, I suppose, where the anxiety comes from, and that sort of fight or flight, absolute alarm, overwhelm, panic, that really inhibits our creativity. But anything we do to stimulate creativity, that makes the anxiety part less strong. It doesn't go away, but it sort of robs it of its power. And reading is a creative act, because when we read, we imagine, and, you know, sometimes it's seeing a scene and seeing a scenario. For me, often when I'm reading a novel, I am imagining, like, what things smell like and what the atmosphere is like, and, you know, almost what the air temperature is. So we're not consciously doing it, but going to that imaginary world, we are stimulating our creativity, which is how anxiety can be kept at bay.
Because it's interesting, like when you're trying to picture people, you know, when you're, I always think with authors, am I picturing them the same way? Because we all come up with our own images. We might be doing it completely differently. There has been recent statistics that literacy levels are unfortunately going down. They're going in the wrong direction. What do you make of that? Because it is really important for children to kind of to read, to stimulate that side of their.
I mean, I feel really strongly about this because I was really lucky, really, really privileged, because I grew up in a house of books, was encouraged to read, taken to the library. I remember being told, like, half the books you take out, half of them can be Babysitters Club books, but half have to be other things. That was the most sort of strictness in my reading routine. But the main thing is I saw my mum and dad reading for pleasure. I could tell they weren't just giving me books to keep me quiet. It wasn't like, oh, these are good for you, eat your vegetables, read a book. I could see them showing me the example of how much fun reading is. And I'd say to any parent out there, it's so hard to find the time. I know, but the thing that would make the most difference to your kids reading is you showing them that reading, you know, is fun, and reading's going to be with you all of your life. And it's a really gorgeous habit to start and to keep.
I guess we're talking about young people here, and another thing that really I think is brilliant, you wrote in your book, The Sisterhood, a love letter to women who have shaped me. Now, this is all about body image, and this is all about, a lot of young people are struggling. Millie Bobby Brown has came out and said about her appearance being ripped apart by people. Women should be building each other up. And I guess it's interesting to come from a perspective of why you wrote about this.
I mean, that one thing I love about reading so much is that when I'm reading about a character that I love, I can imagine exactly how they look like. And there are authors I love, like I'm a massive, massive fan of Marion Keyes. And one of the reasons that I love those books so much is that she writes about the way we feel in our bodies. And quite often, like, you know, with the Walsh sisters, there are certain descriptors, and you have an idea of, like, maybe like hair colour, and you know that everyone loves Helen, and Helen's like the hot one and the charming one. But actually, she's so good at talking. And what's really interesting about those books as well is it's about sisters, and they will see each other as beautiful, but not see themselves as beautiful. And so to have that sense of, like, we can feel awkward and weird in our bodies, but we're allowed to to want to look good and want to feel empowered and want to feel happy and confident and all of those things. Whereas, you know, I mean, I watch a lot of TV. I really love seeing things on screen. But if I see someone look incredibly gorgeous and slender and glowing, I will compare myself with them and feel negative. And you don't have that when you read. You're free to imagine these people in this universe exactly as you want to.
Shout out to Anna Walsh as well. Helen's your favourite. I want to give a shout out to Anna for in Marion Keyes' books. The one thing that Marion does as well, and her mother has said to her, why do you have to write such filthy books? Why? Like she said when she released the last one, she's like, why do they always have to be so filthy? But my God, they're so funny. They're incredible. And there was this divide before about books. You know, it would be like, you know, your grandmother reading Mills and Boon, Julie Cooper. But there has been a rise in Smutty Book. It's a hot book talk. You know, all Smutty Books. You're reading a Smutty book at the minute.
I am, yep. My friend gave me access to her Kindle. She even has soundtracks to listen to when she's reading them. I'm not joking. Yeah, I'm in smart world right now.
With this hierarchy, I don't think we're looking down on it anymore. No. Like on that sort of, because you've written a fairly smutty book.
I've written a fairly smutty novel called Insatiable.
Lovely.
And there's a chapter called, can I say, Read Yourself Sexy?
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
But it's about that I grew up, again, with lots of body hang-ups, lots of shame, lots of anxiety. And that was where, like, my education came from. And it was really radical because it was in novels where I found out about female pleasure and that women were allowed to want that and to want to feel good and to want to kind of explore that universe. So yeah, there's if you like a smutty book, there are plenty of recommendations in there.
But it's empowering to read from the female's perspective as well. Written by a woman is so different from the male gaze, what you see all the time.
And I think going back to kind of young people and what they see, and I know there's so much that you sort of see on a phone, and I don't want to, you know, say, pretend it doesn't exist or say, like, it's all bad, but at the same time, I think when we see anything like that on screen, it's quite overwhelming. And there are, you know, we see lots of difficult things that maybe aren't necessarily healthy or happy or empowering. And in a book, the experience is so different because you get to experience that world at your own pace.
100%. It's amazing. And it's great for the partners as well.
Yes.
Do that. You have been with me in my life way longer than I realised before you were coming on, because you used to write for Bliss Magazine.
Oh,
like the likes of, like, you did problem pages. I remember Bliss and Sugar Magazine. They were they were considered raunchy back in the day, certainly here in Ireland. What was it like writing for magazines, like at that time, like doing problem pages for girls who thought you can't kiss in a bathtub? I remember all the time.
Oh, wow.
I was so into that magazine.
Job at Bliss was the most fun. And what I loved so much about it was, like, you had to write for your reader. I read Vogue, I read fashion magazines, and I love fashion magazines so much, but sometimes, like, you know, this is the skirt length and this is what you do. And it's all, I felt like, oh, the editor's telling me how I should live, which is why, you know, it's definitely, that's been happening with fashion magazines forever. But when you're writing a magazine for teenagers, they set the tone. You are serving your audience. You have got to anticipate what they want to read about and serve them, and you know they are going to tell you exactly what they think if they don't. I think it was the best possible education for me as a novelist and a writer, because I really hope I write for readers that you can't get away with saying, well, this is what I want you to read about.
That they were setting the tone and you were reacting to it. That's incredible, because they were so powerful at the time, those magazines.
Oh, I mean, it was so much fun as well. And I loved the range of it as well, that one day you were talking about, you know, problem pages and those sort of serious issues. And then the next day it's like, can you go and interview One Direction? Oh, if I must,
no.
I have
to. Terrible. You do have a lovely job, though, because you've got a podcast called You're Booked. Tell us about it, because you get to talk to some incredible people.
Oh, it's so much fun. Interviewing authors for Your Booked, obviously. Marion Keyes has been on. That was one of my favourite episodes. That was a cracking book list on that one. She had lots of brilliant recommendations. We've had Nisha Dolan. I get so many recommendations from that. And what I love as well is sometimes I feel a bit daunted by the guest and I think, oh my goodness, I'm talking to this person and I idolise them. And then we realise, oh, we're both fans of the same books. And that's why I think reading is so magical, because it unites us. And even though it's quite a private, intimate activity, you can talk to anyone if you read. Everyone will have some kind of connection with a book. It's a great leveller.
It is. It's a beautiful thing for book clubs, for friends to actually find the time to do that. The chapters in this there's so many, like Read Yourself Sexy, obviously, but Read It and Weep, which is very good, and Read Yourself Funnier. There's so many things in this book. It is called Read Yourself Happy, How to Use Books to Ease Your Anxiety. Daisy Buchanan, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for coming in.
I've loved it. Thank you so much for having me on. I've had such a nice time.
And World Book Day and all, isn't it fabulous?
Perfect.